Welcome to this episode of the Be in the Know podcast, brought to you by our team at Stiles Financial Services. Each episode, we pick a topic and attack it from all angles, delivering insight and knowledge to you, our listeners. I'm Kristen Meyer, and in this episode, I sat down with Brandon Vitale and Brad Fox to talk about real estate, the current status of the housing market, what's going on with mortgage rates, what buyers and sellers need to know, and what they see in the future. So let's dive in. I'm first going to have Brandon introduce himself and let you know a little bit about him.
Well, Christine, it's great to be here. Thank you, first of all, for having me. I'm Brandon Vitale, like she said, and I've been riding this wild mortgage ride for the past 23 years, and loving and hating every bit of it, if I could say that.
Yep.
It's an amazing industry, and it's always interesting. So that's me.
All right, and my other guest today is Brad. So, Brad, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I am Brad Fox. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm a real estate broker and general contractor. And so we kind of do all things residential real estate.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So first, we're going to start off with kind of a check-in. Brad, what is going on in the housing market right now?
What is going on? Great question. Okay. So interestingly enough, it's all rates to me. As a real estate professional, I love that we have a mortgage guy here because a whole nother take on this. But rates. As the rates drop back a little bit, we see an increase in sales, and we have seen that. And so our fall right now, to me, looking at my numbers for our company, have been stronger than previous falls, which is a good thing. But right now, all of a sudden, it's slow again.
Mm-hmm.
So literally, the rate goes up a half a point or 3/4 of a point. And we are, or percent for all you out listening. And it really affects things. It just kind of all of a sudden slows things down. So overall, a much better year than 23. And I think we're heading into a much better year for 25, but we're kind of in this sort of like slow ramp up. That's what I'm seeing.
Okay. Great. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about major demand for entry-level homes. What does the supply versus demand look like at different areas of the market?
Yeah, absolutely. So supply is still down. It's been down. I don't know when the last time supply has been balanced out. Probably not since pre 2008.
Yeah,
I would imagine.
Financial crisis.
Yeah, it's weird how that works.
Yeah.
And so it's always been a supply issue, which does keep demand high. The demand, I think, is the factor with the rates that just sort of like slows things down a little bit. But overall, I think what's happening is I like to say there's a log jam happening. There are people on the sidelines waiting to buy. They want to buy. They're making plans to buy, but in their mind, they have some magic number for an interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as it drops or flirts close to it, then the log jam sort of opens a little bit. Some people pop through, some houses come on the market, and it sort of goes for a little bit. And then as soon as the rates go back towards, say, like 7 or higher, it just kind of closes back off again.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, not like a state of an emergency or by any means. It's really just, it's much better than last year, but that's kind of, to me, where we're sitting is just in this sort of like ebb and flow of this interest rate situation. But still a lot of demand, in my opinion.
Great. Brandon, since Brad did a lovely little intro there on how the rates affect the volume and demand, what's going on with mortgages right now?
Well, of course, it kind of follows what's happening with Brad. And I do think the rate piece is very interesting in that it does seem to be the main driver for buyers. It seems to be like 7 is the rate that everyone stops. And then as soon as there's a 6 behind it, people start getting into it. But what I think is the interesting component to it, when you think about the supply demand component of it, if everyone's jumping into the market when that rate hits 6, you would think that the smart buyer might jump in when it's around that 7% mark. Maybe there's a little bit less homes on the market, and you can interject, Brad. But it seems like that small amount of missed opportunity of homes on the market might give you a better buying power. Maybe negotiate some closing costs, even some rate buy down, which can put you in a better position with the rate and home price than the people that wait till 6. So it's not necessarily the best thing to do, but it is what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally agree.
Excellent. All right. And we will go ahead and jump into kind of some open discussion here. So now we've got a little bit of a check-in done. For those that are looking to buy their very first home, be it a traditional home or a townhouse or a condo, anything along those lines, what are some considerations for first-time home buyers? Why don't we start from a finance standpoint with Brandon?
Yeah. So first time home buyers, um, the biggest thing that I want to interject to the first time home buyer, people thinking about it, is that it kind of seems to me almost like people that are scared to go to the doctor. You're kind of scared
Right.
of what they're going to say, or
Mhm.
meeting with a financial advisor for
Yeah.
the first time. You gotta not be scared to make that first call.
People are very vulnerable when it comes
They're
to
very
finance.
vulnerable, right? So connect with a mortgage professional that's been doing it a long time. They've had these conversations thousands of times, and it's a very secure conversation. So these
Mhm.
conversations don't get discussed. I don't discuss any finances with my wife, and she doesn't even ask me because I squashed that many years ago. So but you will be surprised at what you could purchase. The first big thing is that the old myth about 20% down, that
Right.
is not a thing.
Mhm.
First time home buyers, you can get in as little as 3.5% down, 5% down. Depending on income levels, there's different grants and things that you can get, or second liens, or different things to kind of help you get into it. You don't have to have perfect credit, although it helps.
Mhm. Yep.
And if you're not in a position to buy yet, then that initial consultation can help get you to the right place that in 6 months, a year, or 2 years. So,
Right.
so if you are thinking about buying, just pick up the phone and call
Mhm.
and have that conversation, make a relationship, someone that you trust, and get ready.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Brad, what about from your side? What do you see when first-time home buyers are reaching out to real estate agents?
Yeah, I think honestly, one of the first things, I mean, we have our first intro meeting. I'll go through the general overall flow in the process of buying a home. But one of the first things I will tell them is they need to get their ducks in a row. They need to talk to a financial person.
Yeah.
If they have a financial planner, fine.
Mhm.
If they for sure a mortgage professional, because I don't have, as Brandon alluded to, when they go out in the market, when the rates do drop towards 6, or it's spring market, which is very popular and very hot for
Mhm.
Minnesota.
Yeah.
If you kind of wander out in that market and like, okay, we're going to buy a house, and it's March, and there's going to be 17 offers, and
Right.
the
Yeah.
prices are going to sky rise above, you might be spending $20,000-$30,000 above. All of that's actually okay. We just need to know where you're at. We need to know what our war chest is to go out there and fight for you. So getting your ducks in a row is sort of the first step for sure. And then from there, we know, as real estate professionals and realtors and brokers, then we know what we have to work with, and we can go out there and help you sort of navigate the ins and outs. And it can get a little chaotic. But yeah, having all those things lined up is key.
Right. And I'll talked about it from kind of a financial house standpoint. So when you're going to look at a budget, there's many different components to it. And, one of those is the housing costs. And that usually the biggest payment for people is going to be their mortgage or their rent if they're not a homeowner at that point. And that is a key part of it. And just understanding that that's only a piece of what you need to be looking at when you're budgeting. There are ongoing expenses. Things break in houses. It's a lot of fun. People, if they think even a move-in ready house can have some issues with it. There's no perfect house. So making sure that, you have an emergency savings fund set aside. So making sure that you've got that there. And that's above and beyond your down payment, right? Everyone should have that regardless of whether they own a home or not. So understanding that, and then also taking a look at what your utilities are going to look like, because it can vary a lot. There are some, if you get a townhouse or a condo, there's an HOA that might cover a lot of it. But even those rates can go up each year too, because the underlying costs go up over time. That's just basics of inflation. So just understanding that, and, don't be afraid to reach out to, maybe people that that live nearby where you are and see where they're at. You don't have to go knock on strangers' doors and ask them questions about their finances. That might be a bit awkward, but, there are ways to kind of do your research ahead of time. So just understanding that, and then knowing that, in Minnesota where we are, there are seasons and the costs vary greatly from summer to winter. And there's, if you have a yard, you're going to need some equipment for that too, to clean it up, or a budget set aside if you want someone to do it for you. That's fine as well. But then also just knowing that there's ongoing maintenance down the road. So continuing to know that there are things that need to get updated. And, sometimes you plan for them, sometimes you don't. Just having that in mind as well. So then, making sure that you've been keeping your credit score as good as you can. There's some basics with that, if you just make sure you're doing timely payments, don't utilize more than 30% of your credit, especially if they're going to do a hard pull on it. Kind of behave yourself. Don't go opening store credit cards right before you apply for a mortgage. It's going to ding you. Not a good one. So just making sure that you're kind of being just diligent and intentional ahead of time, because it's not like you go, oh, okay, let's go. And, you might have that initial conversation and go, oh, okay, we're like a year or two away from where we can actually do this. So just making sure that you're kind of tidying up as you go along. So I know one of the major concerns people had, they heard a lot of horror stories about people having lending done to them for their homes that was beyond their means pre-financial crisis. Can you talk a little bit about that, Brandon? And what safeguards are there in place now so that we are not doing that anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. And so a couple key points. First of all, that's great, everything that you said. And if someone's talking to a mortgage professional, loan officer, whatever you call them, and they're not having that conversation about how the mortgage and the payments and all those expenses flow with the rest of your costs, then pick a different mortgage person. There's very much a pendulum on two different sides. One just wants to quote you a rate, give you a payment, tell you if you qualify, and then send you down the path. The other one wants to build a relationship, wants to talk about, one, can I qualify you? And two, does this make sense to even purchase? Because this is the mortgage payment, but also, just like you said, these are the other expenses to think about. Do you have extra few thousand in case this breaks? So those things are very important. The other component that you alluded to, the financial crisis, and one of the things that led to that, amongst many things, was the readily available cash for mortgages, which is completely different. I think I approved somebody. This was 2008. I mean, so this is many years ago, probably before I maybe matured enough to have more in-depth conversations. But I think that I had proved someone at like a 77% debt versus income.
Wow.
And we use pre-tax income, which means realistically, after taxes, they didn't even have enough to pay for the home. So those types of practices, and this was a reputable lender as well. This is just how mortgage happened.
Yep.
And that's what the guidelines were. Like
Right.
those were approved mortgages.
Yeah, it was more through an automated system. If it ran through and it approved, maybe had good credit and some assets or something like that, then it would work its way through. So so that doesn't exist. It's a pretty hard and fast 50%, maybe less on some programs, maybe VA a little bit higher. So right away, you're in a position to where you're not going to definitely overspend. But even so, I think that maybe more the 30% mark, 35% market is where you should be, depending on all of the other financial factors. So, so less of an issue now than it once was, but you still need to have good conversation with a good mortgage professional.
And what about going off of that too? One thing that did happen is the housing bubble burst, and there were people that the value of their home, they were upside down for an extended period of time following that. Can you kind of talk about how that ended up happening, and if we're in a better spot now to not have that happen again?
Well, yeah, I mean, we both lived through that. I've been in the business 20 years now, so
personally and professionally, we all went through it.
Oh my gosh, I remember as a real estate agent, I don't think I did a normal, quote unquote, normal transaction for probably 2 years. And everything was a short sale or foreclosure to be purchased. I think the problem was that people were over leveraged on their homes, and then when they went to sell them, everybody else was trying to sell them at the same time. So essentially, it was a buyer's market, or there's so much inventory coming on the market at one time, trying to get out, or they owned 4 houses and they were trying to unload them because they had, were able to buy 4 houses. So yeah, that was a mess. I think we're so far past that now. I mean, now it's like, there's so few homes on the market now, relatively speaking, that the buyers are all competing for that big time. The one thing I was going to say too, with what we always ask is like, what's your comfortable budget? Because Brandon will be able to qualify you for like your technical budget, but a lot of times that's higher than they end up wanting to spend.
Right.
And that kind of
Mhm.
goes back to the financial planning piece of it. So that's, I mean, to me, that's a good question. It's like, what's your comfortable budget? And then also, this is after the last 3 years since 2020, I like to have people keep some sort of, again, the war chest. Like,
Mhm.
what happens if your budget's 500,000 and your dream home is listed at 499 and we need another 30,000 to try to, out compete with the other offers that are on the market, which is very, very likely scenario at that price point as well. So looking at either waiting a little longer and saving that money, I'll leave that to the professionals, but sometimes it's a loan from mom and dad. I don't know, whatever it has to be, but I think it would be a little naive to think that you won't need something out there. You want to have as many tools in your chest as you possibly can.
Mhm. Great. Anything you want to add to that, Brandon?
Yeah, I do want to also interject about the housing crisis. Is that
Yes.
we've agreed to,
Yes.
to call it?
It's a crisis.
Break it all down.
Yeah,
Brandon, break
it's a
it all down.
crisis.
No,
Yeah.
I want to reiterate that we're so far from that, and there's nothing that is showing that anywhere close to that, or that we ever even see that again.
Right.
So another piece that I saw on the financing side is before that, like I'd mentioned, almost anyone could purchase.
Yeah.
Almost immediately, the guidelines pendulum swung completely to the other side, where you had to have top tier credit and 20% down. So that was actually a reality for a small amount of time. So you don't have much equity or negative equity. You don't have 20% down. That combined with oversupply is an insane thing that will just never happen again.
That's a great point.
Also, the interest only component, which is not the adjustable mortgages, which do stay fixed for a while and adjust over time, but the interest only component, which people had only interest for maybe 10 years, and then it switched to a full amortized payment for a shrunken period of time.
Mhm.
So that as well, but we just don't see interest only loans out there really anymore. So there was like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 punch that made that happen.
It dragged it out.
Yes.
Dragged it out. Yeah. Because I think we had to live through it in order to like cleanse it all, put it behind us. But yeah, I don't think I've seen that foreclosure, maybe one or two in the past 5 years. I mean, it's just not really a part of it. Probably other circumstances.
Right.
So very different market.
Yeah. And so for the people that are scared to get in because they think that might happen, you don't have to worry about it. For people that are waiting for that to happen so they can pick up 6 properties,
Right.
don't.
Yes, don't. I mean, and we've all been hearing that since 2020, I would say, like, oh, the market's going to crash. I'm going to wait.
Oh.
Okay. But everything's just been going up every year. It's not changing. So yeah, time is in real estate. And I say it's just, you got to jump in and ride the wave at some point. It may not always be the exact perfect time. And you might buy your house and the rates might go down 0.25%, next month. But, guess what? They could also go up a point. So you just kind of have to make that decision for your family. And there has to be other aspects of that decision beyond just the interest rate and the actual payment, in my opinion.
Yep. Agreed. The phrase of the year is date the rate and marry the house.
So true.
Yep. There you go.
Never heard that before.
We had to work it in. I had to. Yeah.
I love that line. I was using that this year. All right. So we talked about first-time home buyers. What about people that are going to be looking to upsize and get a new home? So let's talk first about what financing options there are if you are going to be moving up. And then logistically, it can be quite challenging to try to move and buy and sell at the same time. So let's talk through what some options are for people with that. Why don't we talk through financing first? So Brandon, why don't you kick it off?
I love this because as an agent, I want to know how because this is not my world. And we just say, okay, I'd love to help you accomplish this, but I need Brandon.
You're right. Yeah. So it does get a bit more complex, right? When you have a home to sell and you want to buy a home. The very first thing that's important to me, especially in the markets that we've seen over the last however many years, 10 years, it seems that it's always been a bit of a seller's market, right? So there's always been some competition out there. So one of the main things that I see as a differentiator is a non-contingent approval. Ultimately, that says I can buy this home without selling my current home, or I don't have a home to sell. So first-time home buyers, they're automatically non-contingent, right? So that has a little bit of buying power there. If you're buying up and you have a current home to sell, the first thing that I try to do is find a way that this person can purchase the new home without selling their current home. Whether it has to happen or doesn't have to happen, there's a lot of strategy that goes into that. We want to see if they have the ability to do that, and then if needed, an actual strategy that we can execute on. So whether it be, the components that you're going to look at, and one of the things I do hear from realtors all the time, so it's interesting that you're like, Brandon, I want a little feedback from you.
Fix the problem,
what I
Brandon.
what I hear a lot of times is, well, can't you just get a bridge loan?
Yeah.
As though that fixes the problem. So
right, because the bridge loan has no payment, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, you get a bridge loan and then you get 2 houses at once. So that's not the case. If that wasn't clear.
Yeah.
So a bridge loan is one component of it. And you want me to dig into kind of the couple of the pieces? Okay. So really what we're looking at in mortgage, to kind of break it down as easy as possible, it's credit, income versus debt, and assets, right? So if let's just assume you have good credit or a good enough credit. Let's talk about the debt versus income. If you want to purchase non-contingent, you need to qualify with 2 mortgages now, right? So can you do that?
Yep.
The asset piece, if all of your money is tied up in the current home, you have other access to assets. Maybe you can pull from a 401k, or maybe you have some assets with an advisor that can do a line against it or something. Or one of the other options is to take a second mortgage on your current home. It's the bridge loan. Again, one small component of it, but that could be a way that you can pull money for the down payment. So that, like you said, that adds a payment as well. So now you're qualifying for a new payment, current payment, a new debt,
right,
and whatever other loans that you have. So it can certainly be done, but someone has to kind of navigate through this, not theoretically, but actually have a plan in place to where you can execute on this. And then the strategic conversation with them and their real estate agent, which is, okay, we can purchase non-contingent. Ideally, they do want to sell beforehand. So there's a lot of timing in there. And in a perfect world, maybe they can buy non-contingent. They can make an offer non-contingent. Maybe the agent can come in and sell the home really quickly, and they can get those assets, and it can work out that way. But to have that plan that they can execute on it, and maybe for some people, they actually do want to just purchase before they sell so they can get their other home ready.
Yep.
So those are kind of the main components that you have to think about when doing non-contingent approval and when you're doing a buy-up home.
Yep. All right. Great. Brad, how about from your side? What do you see? I mean, is it a dream to have someone who wants to buy and sell a house with you at the same time?
Here's the thing. It's a dream. Yeah, of course. That's a wonderful situation. Ultimately, we want a dream scenario for them, right? And so what happens when we go out in the market, it's like, we go back to the war chest, tool chest, however you want to put it. I just want them to have as many tools at their disposal as possible. And I think, another option is to just sell their house first, live somewhere temporarily, free all that cash up for you guys to advise them on, and then have that money in ready to go. Because I will say, the way I put it with my clients is that buying contingent, you may find a seller that's willing to accept that contingent offer, but that's a concession from them. Right. So they're already conceding by accepting that. And I would rather use concessions from a seller in a much different way. I'd rather get a price concession. I'd rather get repairs done on the property, or closing costs paid to buy down the rate. All these different things. The last thing I want to do is use a concession from a seller. It's okay if we have to do it, we have to do it. But I just think you're in a much stronger position if you're non-contingent. But again, first thing I always tell people is like, of course it's not that easy, right? Because I'm careful because, you sit down with a very normal family, the idea of them qualifying for 2 mortgages is kind of crazy, right? So it's not necessarily this like obvious thing that they can just do. So you do kind of have to work through it a bit. But I've had a lot of clients that just sell first and then they get a 6-month lease on an apartment. Obviously, I advocate for home ownership because that money is kind of going back to you. But I mean, for temporary time, maybe that makes sense. Or live in mom and dad's house while they're down south over the winter. There's all kinds of different things. When Heather and I bought our house, we bought a major project house, and we had to get as much cash out of our current house as we possibly could to renovate this new, monster project that was ridiculous. And so it was like, well, we could either, leverage ourselves and just, over lend and go crazy, or we could just live in an apartment for 6 months. And, it was great. It was fun. They had a pool and the kids had fun.
Exactly.
So, but it freed us up. We were non-contingent when we purchased, and we got that property off market, but we made it as clean and simple for that seller as possible.
Mm-hmm.
There was like smooth path to closing, and that was what sold them on it. We're going to be, we're going to renovate the property. We're not going to ask you to do anything. We're non-contingent. We're the easiest buyer you could possibly have. So it's all just positioning, but I've seen all the things that Brandon discussed. I've seen all my clients do those. And like I said, sometimes you just have to it's maybe the least convenient for you to move into a temporary home, but maybe that's an option as well. It's usually not the most comfortable thing, or people try to avoid that, but that's an option.
Yeah. Okay. Good point.
Awesome. Great. So we talked about from a buying side. How about for sellers? What really needs to be done in a house to get it ready for sale? Brad, I'm gonna start with you on that. This is your wheelhouse.
I like that. And actually, I feel like I've said so many things over the 20 years that they become catchphrases for me, but I'm the only one that knows about them. I tell people I need to come to your house because there's things in your home that you think you need to do that you may not need. It goes both ways, because then there's also probably going to be a list of things that I really want you to do that you need to do before the market. So it just depends on the seller. But you'd be surprised. Every seller knows every nook and cranny of their home, and every buyer is not going to be able to understand that to the fullest extent. They're not going to care about the trim that got nicked when you dropped the hammer on it, 4 years ago. I would remember that. It would drive me crazy every time I walked past it. Is it going to change the outcome of someone buying your home or not? No, it's not going to.
Mm-hmm.
So now if you have green shade carpet in the basement, they're going to notice that, right? So those are projects that we
include
probably
that flooring budget in the
price,
closing.
right?
Yes, that does not help the price. Well, I guess if we're going for a vibe, we're going for a vibe.
Right.
But yeah, so I think there's, I definitely think that if we want to really just sort of package this for some quick takeaways, paint and flooring are the lowest hanging fruit. Paint is definitely the lowest hanging fruit. And I've seen homes completely transform with either professional or not. I lean towards professional if you can, especially for trim work and stuff like that. But you can really change the fresh feeling of a home with the paint. I'd say number one. And then flooring and carpet, also a pretty approachable way to make big changes in your house. You get some great carpet for $3 a foot. It doesn't have to be a crazy thing. Maybe redo your hardwood floors for $3 a foot. Not take them out, put them in, but have them. Yep. They call it a buff and coat. Just kind of freshening things up. You want to give that appearance that there's less maintenance, there's less wear and tear on the house. And the other thing I would think for people prepping their home to sell is make the home feel like you aren't outgrowing it. Because I go into a lot of houses and I know they're outgrowing it.
Great
and they
point.
told me they're outgrowing it and they need to move. And I open those closets and they are jam packed. And you got to you don't want the feel that you guys are leaving for a reason. You do not want to imply why you're selling.
Right.
So that, and those are free, it's free labor. It's your labor, but, prepping and storing things. And I always tell people the garage is fair game. If you got a 2-car garage, fill half of it with bins to the ceiling. Sure, it's a small quirk, but it's still a 2-car garage.
Right.
So, have at it. So put half of your stuff goes in the garage. Those are kind of to me, either affordable or free things you can do to kind of start prepping before you get serious about it.
Right. Awesome. All right. Trying to think of anything else to include on that. Otherwise, I think we're good for the first half. Is there anything else you guys want to include or add on to what we've already talked about that Glenn can put back?
Do people talk to you when they're going to sell? There's not a whole lot. You're just trying to game plan for the purchase.
So it's all, they're going to sell as they're talking to me because they're thinking about purchasing. So that is a part of it. But no, the conversation of what you just spoke about is never part of it. Never part of it. It's
you don't have to awkwardly walk through a house and tell someone their carpet's ugly.
So I was soaking that all in. I love the part about don't make it look like you're outgrowing it.
Right.
I wouldn't even think about that. I would think about putting all the
decluttering,
1,000 shirts in a nice orderly fashion, but not removing
And
them.
I would say,
So
I
that's a
like
big
that,
tip.
but half of the shirts.
Yeah, right.
And then you can order them. Then you can color code them. That's great.
Yeah.
Half of them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for joining us for this episode. For more info, make sure to follow Brandon Vitale, Brad Fox, and Stiles Financial Services on our socials so you can be in the know.
Stiles Financial Services is an SEC fee-only RIA in Minnesota. Information presented is for educational purposes only. No listener should assume that any discussion or information presented serves as the receipt of or the substitute for personalized advice from Stiles Financial or any other investment professional and is not intended as an offer of solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Stiles Financial Services is not a law firm or accounting firm, and no portion of this program should be interpreted as legal, accounting, or tax advice. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for any individual. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific needs.